Hi everybody, this is Mr. Rocco here again. You should have started this assignment by first watching the demonstration video of the model of the cloud in a jar. Or if you chose, you could have actually developed the model for yourself, okay? But you shouldn't be watching this video until you either watch the video or you've actually made the model and tried the experiment for yourself already. You can do either one. So let's start by looking at the problem here. It says, how can you model the cycling of water on Earth? And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to develop a model that shows the formation of a cloud and shows us some of the steps in the water cycle. So the background information says your local public access television station is producing a new series about weather, and the station needs your help. Part of the weather series will be a detailed explanation of the water cycle. They want students to design models that demonstrate different parts of the water cycle. The station has asked your group to design and build a model that demonstrates how warm water vapor condenses and forms liquid water. Keep in mind that the station will want to film your model when it's complete. So if you choose to do this experiment at home, if you want to actually build this model, what you would need to have is you would need either a glass beaker or a glass jar, and that would kind of represent like the atmosphere. You would need hot tap water. You'd need either an aluminum pan or just a jar lid filled with ice cubes, and you need a little bit of hairspray, okay? Again, you're not required to actually build this model, but if you'd like to, there's some pretty simple materials that most of you probably have around at home, and you could try this. Keep in mind, you do not need boiling water, and make sure if you do this experiment that you're being very safe and protecting your eyes and not using boiling water. Alright, so the procedure, the first thing that we're going to do is after you watch the video or you developed your own model, I want you to draw a plan to show how you will use the beaker of hot water and the pan of ice cubes to make your model. So in this space, basically I want you to draw the setup of your model, and you can copy what you saw in the video, or you can do what you did to set up your own model, okay? So if I was drawing this, I would first of all draw the parts of my model, okay? So I know that I'm gonna have a jar, okay? So I'm gonna draw my jar, okay? And just put a little top on it. And try that again here. Let's see, I'm gonna use a different color actually. It's black here. So I'm gonna draw my jar here. Okay, so I got my jar. The other things that I have in my model are my ice cubes, and so I would probably draw some ice cubes on top of my jar lid. That's how I set it up. Okay. I have my warm water, so I put that in there. And I'd want to label some things on here. Okay, so I'm gonna probably write warm water. Okay. And then I have my hairspray, and I'm just gonna show that with little red dots. Remember the hairspray, the purpose of that was to have some sort of particle that the water droplets could form on. So I'm just going to put some red dots in here, and I'm going to label those hairspray. So right now I'm just kind of copying the model that was in the video, right? So you get the idea. I'm not going to do the whole thing for you, but I want you to draw a model to show how you set up your model and the parts of that model and how it works. So make sure you have labels on there. Make sure you show the different materials you use and how you think it works. Okay? So this says observe what happens inside the beaker and on the outside of the pan. So you can do that by watching the video or by doing your own experiment. So then we come down to the analyze part, and it says, what evidence of the water cycle did you observe? So to start this question out, I'll give you a sentence frame. You could say something like the evidence of the water cycle that I observed was, and you can finish the sentence. So by evidence, we're talking about what steps of the water cycle did you see? Did you see evaporation? Did you see condensation? Did you see precipitation? Did you see runoff? What steps did you see and what did it look like? So we're basically recording our observations. What did you see in the model that represents parts of the water cycle? Okay, then it says construct explanations. Explain which parts of the water cycle can be observed using your model. So this is similar to the last question, but instead of just making observations of what you saw, you're talking about the specific parts of the water cycle that were demonstrated in your model. So you can say, using my model, I observed, and then you can finish that sentence. Using my model, I observed what? What parts did you observe? Like, what specific things happened that are part of the water cycle? Okay, the next part, you have a chart here and it says, develop models. Tell what each part of the model represents by completing the chart. So remember, a model is a representation of a real process. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at each of the parts of our model, the beaker of hot water, the pan of ice, the hairspray, and the fog in the jar, and I want you to write down what does it actually represent in real life, okay? So the beaker of hot water, that's going to represent evaporation of water, okay, in real life, right? That hot water is where the moisture came from in our model, and that would be similar to the moisture that would be in our atmosphere. Okay, what about the pan of ice? I want you to think about that. What does the ice represent in our atmosphere? What did the hairspray represent? What did the fog in the jar represent? And to find these answers, you can watch that first video, and that meteorologist talks about all these parts of the model and really gives you a good explanation of what they are. Okay, number 4, it says identify limitations. What source of energy is missing from your model? How could you revise your model to include this component? So we know for the water cycle to work, we need energy, right? But we didn't really have a source of energy in our model. So what is missing in our model that would be in nature? Okay, so for your sentence frame, you could say something like, the energy missing, the energy source missing in my model is. And then it says, how could you revise your model to include this component? Okay, so the second part is, I can change my model by including, and then you can finish that sentence. What are you going to add to your model to make it a more realistic model to better represent our atmosphere? And then part 5, it says, give a narrative explanation of how water condenses. So a narrative means like a story. You're going to tell the story of the process. So give a narrative explanation of how water condenses and how clouds and fog form for the film segment for the weather station described in the background section. Remember, you were trying to take on the role of a meteorologist, and you were trying to be describing how the water cycle works. So I want you to use your model, and I want you to describe how water condenses and forms a cloud. Okay, so for a sentence frame, I would say something like, In my model, water condenses and forms a cloud when, and you can finish that sentence, when what happens, what process happens, what actually happens in your model to make the water condense and form a cloud. Okay? So just remember, you guys, we're going to be using this lab as one of our assessments. This is going to be graded as a summative assessment, so I can check your understanding of the steps in the water cycle. So the best way to do well on this assignment is watch that first video carefully, really listen to it, look carefully at the model. If you want to, try making your own model and trying this experiment. And by completing this lab, you're showing me your understanding of the process of the water cycle. Take your time with it. Do a good job on it. If you have questions, send your science teacher a message, and have a great day.